Tupac Shakur, the poet who lived by the code and died by it September 13th, 1996. Las Vegas, Nevada. University Medical Center, 4:03 p.m. The machines beeped steadily in the intensive care unit. Tupac Shakur had been on life support for 6 days, fighting for his life, but his organs were failing. The damage from the bullets was too severe. His mother, Afeni Shakur, sat by his bedside, holding his hand, praying for a miracle. But the doctors had told her the truth. There was no hope. His body was shutting down. Afeni made the heartbreaking decision. Let him go. The doctors turned off the machines. At 4:03 p.m. on September 13, 1996, Tupac Amaru Shakur died from respiratory failure and cardiac arrest. He was 25 years old. 6 days earlier, on September 7th, Tupac had been shot 4 times in a drive-by shooting on the Las Vegas Strip. He'd survived the initial attack, rushed to the hospital, undergone multiple surgeries. But the bullets had punctured his lung, damaged organs, caused massive internal bleeding. His body couldn't recover. Tupac Shakur, the most influential rapper of his generation, the poet who spoke for the voiceless, the revolutionary who couldn't escape the violence he rapped about, was gone. His murder has never been solved. Theories abound. East Coast versus West Coast, gang violence, industry conspiracy, police involvement. But one thing is certain. Tupac Shakur lived exactly how he rapped. Fast, dangerous, unapologetically real, revolutionary. And he died the same way. Now let me tell you the story of Tupac Shakur, the child of revolutionaries who became the voice of the streets, the poet who turned pain into art, the activist who challenged the system, and the young man who got caught in a war he helped create. This is the story of an artist who refused to be silenced, until bullets silenced him. The revolutionary's son, long before the fame, long before the feuds, long before the bullets. There was a boy in Harlem who was born into revolution. Tupac Amaru Shakur was born on June 16, 1971, in East Harlem, New York City. He was named after Tupac Amaru II, an 18th century Peruvian revolutionary who led an indigenous uprising against Spanish colonial rule. He was captured, tortured, and executed, dismembered in the town square. My mother gave me a revolutionary's name, Tupac later said. I had to live up to it. His mother, Afeni Shakur, was a member of the Black Panther Party, a revolutionary activist who fought for black liberation and social justice. When Afeni was pregnant with Tupac, she was in jail, arrested on conspiracy charges related to planned bombings. She defended herself in court while pregnant, and won. Tupac was born 1 month after her acquittal. My mother was my hero, Tupac said. She taught me to stand up, to never back down, to fight for what's right. But Tupac's childhood was anything but stable. His father figures were absent or unreliable. His mother struggled with addiction. They moved constantly, lived in poverty. Sometimes they were homeless, sleeping in shelters, couch surfing with friends. We were poor as fuck, Tupac recalled. I remember being hungry, really hungry. But Afeni made sure Tupac was educated, cultured. She took him to museums, theater performances, poetry readings. She exposed him to revolutionary literature, the writings of Malcolm X, Angela Davis, Huey Newton. My mother taught me that art is revolution, Tupac said, that words can be weapons. By age 12, Tupac was writing poetry, performing in his first play, discovering he had a gift for performance. In 1984, when Tupac was 13, the family moved from New York to Baltimore, Maryland. It was in Baltimore that Tupac would discover his artistic voice. He enrolled at the Baltimore School for the Arts, a prestigious performing arts high school. And for the first time in his life, Tupac found a place where he belonged. He studied acting, ballet, poetry, Shakespeare. People don't know this about me, Tupac later joked. I was a theater kid. I did ballet. I played parts in plays. His classmates at Baltimore School for the Arts included a young girl named Jada Pinkett. They became close friends. Tupac was brilliant, Jada later said. He had this energy, this passion. He could make you laugh, make you think, make you feel. Tupac excelled at the school. He was talented, charismatic. Teachers loved him. But in 1988, a Feeney moved the family again, this time to Marin City, California, a rough neighborhood just north of San Francisco. Tupac had to leave Baltimore School for the Arts, leave his friends, start over in a new place. He was devastated. Marin City was different, rougher, more dangerous. Tupac saw poverty, drug dealing, gang violence, police brutality, and he started writing about it, in poetry, in rhymes. Tupac started rapping, freestyling with friends, performing at local events. He was good, really good. His lyrics were different from other rappers, more poetic, more political, more personal. In 1989, Tupac joined a rap group called Digital Underground as a backup dancer and roadie. Digital Underground was known for their funky, playful style, but Tupac was hungry for something deeper. In 1991, he appeared on Digital Underground's song Same Song. It was his first appearance on a professional recording. The industry noticed. This kid had something, raw talent, presence, something to say. In 1991, at 20 years old, Tupac Shakur signed a record deal as a solo artist. And he was about to change hip-hop forever, but his revolutionary spirit would also make him enemies, powerful enemies. Tupacalypse Now, the voice of the streets. Tupac's debut album, Tupacalypse Now, was released in November 1991. It wasn't a commercial smash, didn't have radio-friendly hits, didn't top the charts, but it was revolutionary. The album addressed police brutality, systemic racism, poverty, teenage pregnancy, drug addiction. Songs tackled issues mainstream rap ignored. Tupac rapped about his mother's struggle with crack addiction, about police killing black men, about young black men trapped in cycles of violence. Tupac wasn't rapping about parties and money, said a music critic. He was rapping about survival, about injustice, about pain. The album was controversial. Vice President Dan Quayle publicly condemned it after a Texas trooper was killed by a young man who had listened to Tupac's music. "This album has no place in our society," Quayle said. Tupac fired back. "I'm not promoting violence. I'm reflecting reality. The violence already exists. I'm just the messenger." The controversy made Tupac famous and infamous. Law enforcement started watching him. Conservative politicians condemned him. But young people, especially young black men, embraced him. "Tupac was speaking our truth," said a fan. "He was saying what we felt but couldn't articulate." In 1993, Tupac released his second album, Strictly 4, My Niggaz. The album was more successful commercially, featured the hit single Keep Your Head Up, a tribute to black women and single mothers. It was a softer side of Tupac, showing his depth, his compassion. But Tupac's life was becoming increasingly chaotic. Legal troubles were piling up. In 1991, Tupac filed a $10 million lawsuit against Oakland police for brutality. In 1992, he was involved in a shooting in Marin City that left a 6-year-old boy dead. Tupac claimed self-defense. Charges were eventually dropped, but the incident haunted him. "That kid's death weighs on me," Tupac said. "I think about him every day." Tupac was also making enemies in the industry. He had feuds with other rappers, spoke openly about issues, didn't play politics. Tupac couldn't shut up, said a music executive. He always said what he thought, and it got him in trouble. In 1993, Tupac starred in his first major film role, Poetic Justice with Janet Jackson. He played a postal worker who goes on a road trip. Critics praised Tupac's performance. He wasn't just a rapper, he was a legitimate actor. But in November 1993, Tupac was charged with sexual assault in New York. A woman claimed Tupac and his friends assaulted her in a hotel room. Tupac maintained his innocence. "I didn't do it," he said. "I'm being set up." In February 1995, Tupac was convicted of sexual abuse and sentenced to 18 months to 4.5 years in prison. He was devastated. "I'm not a rapist," he insisted. "The system wants to destroy me." But before Tupac went to prison, something happened that would change hip-hop forever. On November 30th, 1994, Tupac was shot 5 times in the lobby of a New York recording studio, and he blamed his former friends on the East Coast. The war was about to begin. The shooting and the beginning of the war, November 30th, 1994. Quad Recording Studios, Manhattan. Tupac arrived at the studio around midnight. He was there to record with rapper Little Sean, and he'd been invited by associates of Sean, Puffy Combs, and the notorious B.I.G., Biggie Smalls. Tupac and Biggie were friends at the time, close friends. Biggie had even stayed at Tupac's house. As Tupac entered the lobby, 3 men approached him. "Give us your jewelry," one demanded. Tupac refused, went for his gun. The men opened fire. 5 bullets hit Tupac, 1 in the head, 1 in the arm, 3 in his legs and groin. Tupac fell to the ground. The men took his jewelry, thousands of dollars worth, and fled. Tupac was conscious, bleeding heavily, in shock. He dragged himself to the elevator, rode up to the studio, collapsed. Biggie and Puffy were upstairs. They rushed to him. "Who did this?" they asked. Tupac looked at them, said nothing, because in that moment, Tupac made a decision. He blamed them, not because he had proof, but because of the circumstances, because of the setup, because of the timing. "Biggie and Puffy knew," Tupac later claimed. "They set me up." Biggie and Puffy vehemently denied it. "We had nothing to do with it." They insisted. But Tupac didn't believe them. He survived the shooting, checked himself out of the hospital the next day, against doctors' orders, showed up to court in a wheelchair for his sexual assault trial. The image of Tupac in a wheelchair, bandaged, defiant, became iconic. Tupac was convicted and sentenced to prison. While appealing his conviction, he was incarcerated at Clinton Correctional Facility in upstate New York. In prison, Tupac was angry, bitter, felt betrayed by the industry, by the East Coast, by Biggie and Puffy. He started writing, furiously, channeling his rage into music. Then, in October 1995, something happened that would change Tupac's career and seal his fate. Suge Knight, CEO of Death Row Records, offered to pay Tupac's $1.4 million bail in exchange for signing with Death Row. Tupac agreed. On October 13, 1995, Tupac walked out of prison, signed to Death Row, and moved to Los Angeles. He was now aligned with the West Coast, with Suge Knight, with Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg, and the East Coast versus West Coast rivalry, which had been simmering, exploded. Tupac was about to release the biggest album of his career and sign his own death warrant. All eyes on me, Tupac at his peak. In February 1996, just 4 months after getting out of prison, Tupac released All Eyes on Me. It was a double album, 27 tracks, nearly 2 hours of music, and it was a masterpiece. The album had everything: club bangers, introspective tracks, diss songs aimed at East Coast rappers, songs about living fast, surviving violence, loyalty, betrayal, thug life. The album debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200, sold over 500,000 copies in its first week. By the end of 1996, it had sold over 5 million copies. It would eventually sell over 10 million, one of the best-selling rap albums of all time. Tupac was at the absolute peak of his career, the biggest rapper in the world, but he was also in deeper than ever with gang culture. Death Row Records was affiliated with the Bloods gang, specifically the Mob Piru subset. Suge Knight himself had gang ties. Tupac, trying to fit in, adopted gang culture, wore red, used gang signs, associated with known gang members. Tupac wasn't a gang member, said a friend, but he wanted to be accepted, so he played the part. Tupac also escalated the feud with Biggie in the East Coast. He released diss tracks, gave interviews where he claimed he'd slept with Biggie's wife, Faith Evans, mocked Biggie publicly. Biggie responded with his own diss tracks. The rivalry became personal, vicious. The entire hip-hop industry was divided. East Coast versus West Coast. Biggie versus Tupac. It was dangerous, said a music executive. Real dangerous. People were getting hurt. In June 1996, Tupac released another diss track aimed at Biggie. The feud was at its height, but Tupac was also being productive. He'd recorded hundreds of songs, was working on multiple albums, acting in films. Tupac worked like he was running out of time, said a producer, like he knew his time was short. In September 1996, Tupac traveled to Las Vegas for the Mike Tyson versus Bruce Seldon boxing match at the MGM Grand. He was with Suge Knight, other death row associates, members of the Bloods. After the fight, as they were leaving the MGM Grand, Tupac and his crew got into a physical altercation with a Crips gang member named Orlando Anderson in the hotel lobby. Security footage showed Tupac and others beating Anderson, kicking him on the ground. It was a bad decision, a dangerous decision, because Orlando Anderson was connected and he had friends. That night, September 7th, 1996, Tupac Shakur would be shot on the Las Vegas Strip, and 13 days later, he'd be dead. The war Tupac helped create finally claimed him. September 7th, 1996, the night on the Strip. September 7th, 1996, 11:15 p.m., Las Vegas Strip. Tupac was in the passenger seat of a black BMW 750 sedan. Suge Knight was driving. They were heading to Club 662, a nightclub Suge owned, for an after-party following the Tyson fight. The car was stopped at a red light at the intersection of Flamingo Road and Koval Lane. Tupac had the window down, music playing. He was talking to fans in another car. Then a white Cadillac pulled up alongside them on the passenger side. Someone in the Cadillac rolled down the window and opened fire. Gunshots erupted. 14 rounds, rapid fire. Tupac was hit 4 times, twice in the chest, once in the arm, once in the thigh. Suge Knight was grazed by a bullet fragment in the head. Minor injury. The Cadillac sped away, disappeared into Las Vegas traffic. Suge tried to drive Tupac to the hospital, but he was disoriented, made a U-turn, drove the wrong way. Police pulled them over, found Tupac slumped in the passenger seat, bleeding profusely. "Pac, who shot you?" an officer asked. Tupac, barely conscious, said one word: "Fuck you." He refused to cooperate with police. The street code, no snitching. An ambulance arrived. Paramedics rushed Tupac to University Medical Center. Surgeons worked through the night. Tupac's right lung was removed. His internal injuries were severe. He was placed in a medically induced coma on life support. For 6 days, Tupac fought for his life. His mother, Afeni, stayed by his side. So did friends, death row associates. But on September 13th, 1996, Tupac's body gave out. At 4:03 p.m., Tupac Amaru Shakur died at 25 years old. The Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department launched an investigation, but they hit a wall. Nobody was talking. The street code was strong. Tupac himself had refused to identify his shooters, and witnesses either didn't see anything or refused to cooperate. The most common theory, it was gang retaliation. Orlando Anderson, the Crips gang member Tupac and his crew had beaten earlier that night, was the prime suspect. Anderson had motive. He'd been publicly humiliated, and he was connected to the Southside Crips, enemies of the mob Piru Bloods. Police say, questioned Anderson. But he denied involvement, and without witnesses, they couldn't charge him. In 1998, Orlando Anderson was killed in an unrelated gang shooting in Compton. He was 23 years old. To this day, Tupac's murder remains officially unsolved, but theories abound. Gang retaliation theory. Orlando Anderson and Southside Crips killed Tupac as revenge for the MGM beating. East Coast theory. Biggie or Bad Boy Records ordered the hit. No evidence supports this. Suge Knight theory. Suge orchestrated Tupac's death because Tupac wanted to leave death row. Highly speculative. Police, FBI theory. Law enforcement killed Tupac because he was a threat to the system. Conspiracy theory, with no evidence. The most likely explanation is the simplest: gang retaliation. Orlando Anderson or associates killed Tupac as revenge. Tupac got caught in gang politics, said a former LAPD detective. He wasn't a gang member, but he associated with them, and that got him killed. 6 months later, on March 9, 1997, the notorious B.I.G. was also shot and killed in Los Angeles. The East Coast versus West Coast war had claimed both of its biggest stars, and hip-hop would never be the same. The legacy, the poet who never stopped speaking. More than 25 years have passed since Tupac Shakur died in that Las Vegas hospital, and his influence is everywhere. Tupac released 4 albums during his lifetime. Since his death, his estate has released 7 more posthumous albums, using his unreleased recordings. He sold over 75 million records worldwide, one of the best-selling music artists of all time. But Tupac's legacy isn't just about sales, it's about impact. He brought poetry to rap, political consciousness, vulnerability, depth. Before Tupac, rappers didn't talk about their mother's crack addiction, about fear, about insecurity, about the contradiction of thug life and wanting something better. Tupac did all of that, and he did it brilliantly. Tupac showed us rap could be art, said Kendrick Lamar, who cites Tupac as his biggest influence, that you could be tough and vulnerable, street and conscious. Eminem, J. Cole, Drake, Nas. Every major rapper since Tupac cites him as an influence. Tupac changed the game, said Jay-Z. He raised the bar for what rap could be. But Tupac's legacy is also cautionary. He lived by a code: loyalty, authenticity, never backing down. But that code got him killed. Tupac couldn't walk away, said a friend. From the beef, from the streets, from the image, and it cost him his life. After Tupac's death, hip-hop began to shift. The East Coast versus West Coast rivalry died down. Rappers started choosing life over the streets. Losing Tupac and Biggie woke everybody up, said Snoop Dogg. We realized we were destroying ourselves. Tupac's mother, Afeni Shakur, spent the rest of her life preserving his legacy. She managed his estate, authorized releases, kept his message alive. Afeni died in 2016. She never got justice for her son's murder. In 2017, a museum dedicated to Tupac opened in Los Angeles. It features his lyrics, personal belongings, and explores his impact on culture. In 2023, a man named Dwayne Keefe D. Davis was arrested and charged with Tupac's murder. Davis, a former Crips gang member, had publicly admitted in interviews that he was in the white Cadillac that night, that he provided the gun, that his nephew, Orlando Anderson, pulled the trigger. The case is ongoing. Whether it brings closure after 27 years remains to be seen. Tupac's poetry has been published in multiple books. His acting work is still celebrated. His activism still inspires. Tupac was more than a rapper, said his childhood friend Jada Pinkett Smith. He was a revolutionary, a poet, a warrior. Every June 16th, Tupac's birthday, fans around the world celebrate his life, post his lyrics, share his message. Every September 13th, they mourn his death, but mostly, They listen to his music, and they hear a voice that refused to be silenced, a voice that spoke for the voiceless, that challenged the system, that told uncomfortable truths, and that voice will never die. Epilogue. The revolutionary who lived fast. If Tupac Shakur had lived, what would he have become? Would he have matured, left the gang culture, focused on acting and activism? Would he have made peace with Biggie, produced albums for young artists, become an elder statesman of hip-hop? We'll never know. All we have are 25 years, 5 studio albums, dozens of films and unreleased recordings, and a legacy that shaped hip-hop forever. On September 7th, 1996, Tupac Shakur was shot on the Las Vegas Strip, likely as gang retaliation for a fight earlier that evening. He died 6 days later, killed by the same violence he'd rapped about his entire career. The irony is painful. Tupac spoke about escaping the streets, about the cycle of violence destroying young black men, but he couldn't escape it himself. Tupac was caught between two worlds, said a biographer. The revolutionary and the thug, the poet and the gangster. He couldn't reconcile them. But that contradiction is exactly what made Tupac compelling. He was complex, multifaceted, human. He could rap about revolution in one song and parties in the next. Could be thoughtful and violent, conscious and reckless. Tupac was real, said a fan. He didn't pretend. He showed all of himself, the good and the bad. On that September day in 1996, the hip-hop world lost its most revolutionary voice. But Tupac Shakur's words, his poetry, his music, his message, live on. In every rapper who speaks truth to power, in every young person who finds courage in his lyrics, in every activist who fights for justice, Tupac wanted to change the world, and in many ways he did. He just didn't get to see it. Rest in power, Tupac. The revolution continues.